one of the things that we're starting to see in the United States is how can you effectively use, for example, teachers' assistants in a class who may not be fully certified teachers, but can break up, let's say, a class of 90 into smaller groups. This is also where technology can also potentially make a difference, because it's conceivable that if you've got some sort of technology, a couple of laptops, that you can leverage one teacher into multiple instruction. The question you raise, though, makes me want to suggest to my team when we leave here that we start taking some of the best practices and some of the things that we're learning in the United States and seeing if there may be some application. We might be able to start some pilot programs here in South Africa to see if we can make an impact there. Good. All right. Last question? One more. All right. All these folks have been so patient in the back, I don't want them to feel neglected. So, all right, this gentleman right here, because he seems very eager, right here. Yes, you right there.
Excuse me.
Go ahead. But you guys can feel free to stand together if you want, but I'm only going to take a question from one of you. What's your name?
My name is Sydney Mukumo. I'm from Limpopo. Thank you. President Obama, I met you in 2006. I was working for the embassy.
Excellent.
Yes. I'm very much worried about some of United States international, foreign policy, especially on environment. President Obama, today I want you to tell these young leaders about the foreign policy of United States in environment.
On the environment?
Yes, because South Africa is facing the same problem. Whatever is happening in America, it's affecting us.
Good.
Please tell this is your children. Tell us today.
Yes.
Just like people who are protesting outside, there are people who are crying. And then now you must address them.
Okay,
here,
let's go.
And then tell them outside what is happening. Make it clear, and then when you go back, you'll have a safe trip. Thank you very much, President.
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'll see if I can make it clear. U.S. environmental policy is something that I care deeply about. Some of you know I grew up in Hawaii, one of the most beautiful places on earth, and as a child I was just taught to treasure what the earth gives us and to make sure that we leave it for the next generation. And obviously in a country like South Africa with incredible beauty and natural resources, that same mentality about conserving the earth and nurturing it to pass on to future generations, I think applies here just as much as it does in the United States. The biggest challenge we have environmentally, and it is an international challenge that we cannot solve alone, is the issue of climate change. There are other issues. Dirty water, dirty air, but the truth is that we've made enormous progress over the last several years, over the last several decades in the United States. And if you come to the United States, environmental quality is pretty good. And internationally, we've promoted policies around how mercury is released into the environment, and how other poisons are released in the environment, and how businesses have to be held to international standards in terms of worker safety. Those are areas where the United States has been at the forefront. We've been at the front of the line, not the back of the line when it comes to those issues. But the existential challenge that we face has to do with a warming planet. And your generation is the one that's going to be most severely affected. Now, the United States and other highly industrialized developed countries over the last 50, 100 years have been pumping up carbon emissions into the atmosphere. And slowly this has been building up, and it is warming the planet. And we may be reaching a tipping point in which, if we do not solve this problem soon, it will spin out of control and change weather patterns in ways that we can't anticipate, with drought, floods, much more severe natural disasters. And unfortunately, in those situations, it's often poorer countries that are affected the most by these changing climate patterns. So I just gave a speech this past week on what the United States is going to do on our next phase of reducing our carbon emissions. The United States actually reduced our carbon emissions more than any other country since I came into office. I just want to make that point. We doubled fuel efficiency standards on cars. We're investing in clean energy like solar and wind. And we actually want to share that technology because we think that all countries need to benefit. And part of the opportunity for Africa is to see if we can leapfrog some of the polluting practices of America or Europe and go straight to the clean energy strategies that will allow you to advance economic growth but not corrupt the planet. So we've made progress, but we haven't done enough. And what I did was to say, I challenged the United States. I said, we've got to do more. We're going to start regulating our power plants more efficiently. We're going to make sure that we redouble our efforts to reduce our carbon emissions, and we're setting a goal to meet the agreements that we had both in Copenhagen and in Durban for advanced countries that have a big carbon footprint. But let me make one last point. The United States cannot do it by itself. And the biggest emitter of carbon right now is China. They still have a much lower carbon footprint per person than the United States. But because they have so many people, it's going up rapidly. And Chinese leaders understand this. The same thing that's sending all the carbon into the atmosphere is also making it difficult to breathe in Beijing. So they recognize they've got to come up with a new development model. India is going to have to come up with new development models. Africa, we're going to all have to work together to find ways in which collectively we reduce carbon, but we make sure that there's some differentiation so that countries that are very wealthy are expected to do more, and countries that are still developing, obviously they shouldn't be resigned to poverty simply because the West and Europe and America got there first. That wouldn't be fair. But everybody's going to have to do something. Everybody's going to have to make some important choices here. And I expect that it's going to be your generation that helps lead this, because if we don't, it's going to be your generation that suffers the most. Ultimately, if you think about all the youth that everybody's mentioned here in Africa, if everybody's raising living standards to the point where everybody's got a car and everybody's got air conditioning and everybody's got a big house, well, the planet will boil over unless we find new ways of producing energy. And tomorrow, or the next day when I visit Tanzania, I'm actually going to be going to a power plant to focus on the need for electrification, but the need to do it in an environmentally sound way. So let me just close by saying this. This has been an unbelievable conversation. I had a lot of faith in all of you before I came here. Now I have even more faith in you. You guys are all going to do great things. I'll be retired by the time you do them, and so I'll just sit back and watch, and I'll be proud of you. But what I promise you is that the United States government and the American people are going to want to be your partner for the duration of your careers. And I hope all of you, again, apply